Welcome to Pario Magazine, where I chat with individuals who have a desire to create. Today, I'm joined by a multi-talented creative. On one hand, this person is a folk singer-songwriter, and on the other, she is a music publicist. Welcome to Pario Magazine, Karen Harding.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for having me.
It's a pleasure. So we're here today to chat about your journey through the world of music. Before we dive into that, though, do you want to give our audience a brief introduction as to who Karen is away from the world of music?
Away from the world of music. Absolutely. Yeah, I am the kind of person that just likes to do a bit of everything. I'm kind of one of those bitses that has to try everything. So I actually, as well as music and my publicity business, I actually work a full-time job. So I work in the accounting industry, which is completely away from creativity, but it's nice to balance things out. And I also paint. So I do a little bit of art, and I have a little Etsy store that I sell my art on. And other than that, I'm just a dog mum. I like to do a bit of yoga. I love to get outdoors. That's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Very nice. I like that you have that mixture of left and right brain with creativity and then accounting. It's unusual.
Yeah, well, it does. It helps though. It comes together to really help to know how to create a full picture. I mean, so much of music is a business, and you really need to understand how you can build your business, and the accounting definitely helps with that too.
Yeah, I was thinking I imagine that would be very helpful in terms of how do I grow and make this creative venture a potential career.
And great resources too. Mm.
So, as I mentioned in the intro, we're here today to chat about the two facets of your music journey. I assume the passion for music came before the PR side. And if so, how did you
Yeah.
discover the passion for music?
Yeah, well, I guess music has really always been a part of me. So I grew up in a church environment, and within that environment, there's a lot of singing and there's a lot of, getting up on stage and creating music and sharing different emotions and things like that. So it was always from very young, I was involved in that. I started to learn piano when I was 6 years old, and I had a great teacher who taught me both music and playing piano, but also the theory behind that. So what goes into a song. And so I spent many years learning that. I always sang, but I started formal lessons when I was 14, and singing became my real passion. So the voice was absolutely a part of that. And then guitar's a lot more recent. I actually taught myself guitar during COVID. So that's a more recent addition. But yeah, music has just always been a part of my life, and I think it's a great way to really express how you're feeling as well. I think we all need kind of an outlet to be able to express our emotions. And for a long time, music was just for me. Like, it wasn't something I shared. I was a very reserved person, a very shy girl. And so I would write music, and I would never even consider that there was a possibility of showing people what I created. It was really just kind of a therapy.
At least you found sort of some positive benefit to the lockdowns. You expanded your skill set, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lockdowns, for me, lockdowns were amazing for music because, yeah, obviously I learned guitar, but I also had the time to really consider what I was doing, and I had the time to really create music. It was before lockdowns, I wasn't releasing music, so that's when I really began.
Okay. And as you mentioned, you sort of were in that gospel choir, like church environment. Were they your earliest inspirations, and how have those inspirations evolved over the years?
Yeah, well, I guess I grew up right from when I was able to speak and singing these songs in a church. The whole, they call it a congregation for those who aren't familiar with churches, but you're in the congregation and everybody's singing. So And my mum absolutely adored singing. Like she was always the loudest voice in the group. So it was, yeah, that was always a huge influence. But I think for me, the songwriting side really developed as I got older, and I was able to, yeah, I guess you start thinking for yourself and you start seeing the world very differently. Um,
And
yeah, so I guess it's matured over time.
was there a moment where you went from just using music as a personal therapy to being like, okay, I need to actually share this with the world?
Yeah, it's an interesting story actually. So before I started releasing music, I started a platform at the very beginning of lockdowns for artists, independent artists, to get up and perform online, and it was called Sounds on the Couch, which has developed a lot since then. And that platform gave me the opportunity to really talk to both a lot of artists that are building their own following and their own careers, but also a lot of experts in the music industry. I found it amazing during lockdowns that you were able to reach so many more people because everyone was just at home. So you'd
Mhm.
send them an email saying, "Oh, do you want to do an interview?" And people that you didn't have the access to normally had the time. And so I had great opportunities to talk to these people. And it was through that that I just went, oh, maybe there's this whole other area I can explore. And maybe it is a possibility for me. And I think it was a process of building my self belief and myself, um, like the idea of my music being good enough to really get it out there and start sort of seeing what would happen. So yeah, that's really how that kind of got started.
Okay. And in terms of the music now, how would you describe it for someone who may not have heard you before?
Yeah, it's extremely because it is kind of my therapy. It's very much an emotional, like it touches on some um, like human emotions that we all experience. But because a lot of those songs were written during that lockdown period that I have released up until now, they are quite emotional. And it's folky. A lot of it's very acoustic, but there are some very different ones in there. It touches on subjects like anxiety. It touches on subjects about, wanting to get away, wanting to get out and explore the world. Touches on subjects like, I'm struggling right now, but, I believe I'm going to be okay. Yeah, there's a lot of those sort of deep emotions that I think a lot of people have connected to, and I've had a lot of that feedback from people that have listened to my music.
Yep. Yeah. Very relatable in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
think a
then,
lot of these stories are very personal, but at the same time as being personal, it's something we all experience. So even though it might be my experience that it comes from, it's actually something that others experience in their own lives, so they can apply that to their own background and experience.
and recently you collaborated with the Cologne Chamber Orchestra for It's Okay and Greener on the Other Side. How did that whole collaboration come about?
Yeah, it was interesting actually. I think social media is an amazing thing. Like, I have absolutely loved exploring the fact that social media can allow you to reach people completely on the other side of the world, in different time zones with different cultures. And through my social media, I had a group in Argentina reach out to me, the PNM Records, and I started working on them with my previous single. Gosh, strong for you.
Mhm.
Mental blank. And through that song, like we realized that we worked really well together, and they said, we've got this connection with the Cologne Chamber Orchestra. We would absolutely love your voice to be combined with that, and that's how that eventuated. Um, but it was just an incredible experience to be working. Obviously I'm Australian, and to be working with a group in Argentina, completely different culture, and then the Cologne Chamber Orchestra, which is again another culture, another way of music, another way of thinking, and to bring that all together, I think it brings a lot of magic to the outcome because it's something that you know, you have all those influences that are brought to the music. It's not just something that comes from my head. It's a combination of all these different people and experiences, which I think is really beautiful.
How did that sort of process play out? Was it kind of they did a bit, they sent it to you, then you did your bit, sent it back,
Yeah.
and back and forward like that?
It was remote. So originally I came up with an idea. So I would just send them like a melody and some basic lyrics to start with. And then the group in, so P&M Records would then come together and put together some music ideas, some track ideas. And then I would come back and I would build on the lyrics and record my vocals. Then it would go to the Cologne Chamber Orchestra, they'd add in their bits, and then I re-recorded my vocals and we just cleaned it up, and yeah, that was the process.
Was it kind of
So I've never met
a
them in
lengthy
person.
process?
Um, they were quite, the whole process was actually quite quick, though I would have probably expected that you would think it would take months, but everyone was ready to go. So yeah, it was as soon as tracks were sent over, it was all started. The next step.
Awesome. And was the inspiration for those songs similar to your others, with the lockdowns being a major influence?
So at the time I wrote these songs, it was actually out of lockdown. So, um, but I think post lockdowns, there's been a lot of change and that we've had to get used to. And so I think there's a lot of lockdown influence in there. One of them is through doing all this music and doing so many different things, you know, I've experienced so many more options, and it makes you go, a lot of the things that I've already got in my life, do I is this still exactly how I want to live now that things are going back to the new normal or whatever it is. So um, greener on the other side is the idea that, you know, is the grass always greener on the other side? So, you know, is what I'm considering in life, any changes that I'm considering making, is it actually going to be something that's better, or is it better to stay with what I'm doing? So that's where that song comes from. And It's Okay, it was just written, there was something that happened between me and a friend, and I was feeling quite down on myself at the time. And so that song was actually written to say, you know, I am struggling right now, um, but it's going to be okay. You know, I believe I'm okay. I'm still here. I'm still alive. And that's, yeah, that's the essence of that song.
Okay. So then now, as we transition across to your other creative passion, your PR side, and the Rise Indie PR label, what influenced you to go down that path?
Yeah, well, again, that just really came out of Sounds on the Couch. So I'd been, as Sounds on the Couch developed, so originally it was live performances online, but as lockdowns changed, it wasn't really viable to keep that going time-wise. And it wasn't really what artists were needing at that
Mhm.
point. So we developed, so we've got a online magazine. We've got, you know, a lot of publicity type things, workshops, you know, a community. And from that, I began to connect to a lot more, both publicists, managers, a lot more people behind the scenes. And um, I also connected to a lot of the the publicity that artists were needing. And so really from that, I just sort of thought there's a bit of a gap. I felt there's a bit of a gap between independent artists knowing what they need and emerging artists knowing what they need in terms of getting started with PR, and the existing publicity formats in a lot of cases. I think a lot of the time, independent artists have so much information around them, they just don't know how to get started, and
Mhm.
they don't know what they need, and they don't know how it works. And so I wanted to create Rise Indie as a way to both give them the publicity service, but also educate them so that they can know, first of all, what their goals are, and how they can progress in developing a story about themselves, a story about their music, and a story about their release. So that's really where that came out of.
Okay. And does it focus purely on music PR, or do you have other creative sides as well?
Um, that's a great question, actually. For the majority, it is music PR, but I also work with a coach who coaches about public speaking and speaking within the. She's actually come out of the music side, but um, yeah, it's her coaching business, her um, yeah, the corporate relations. She deals with a lot of executives and things like that. So I do that, and I have done some music events, and so it's not necessarily music releases themselves, but it's events that maybe music managers are putting on, or other music related sort of entities. So I've done a lot of that as well. But yeah, for the most part, it's definitely music releases or music happenings. So if there's something that they want to announce or something that they would like to sort of portray with the media.
Okay. And in your opinion, how important is it for creatives to find a good publicist?
Mm, Look, I think you can definitely do PR yourself. It's a possibility, but it takes a huge amount of time, and it's very hard when you don't have the connections built up. I think probably for first releases, it is beneficial if you've got the time and the resources to do it yourself. But PR gives you that knowledge and that expertise and connections that you wouldn't have if you were just jumping into it yourself. It's also, I think, beneficial to use. So, I mean, PR is more than just reaching out to publications. So, it's more than just sending an email, it's really developing what you're wanting to portray to the public. Um, so, who am I? What is the message I'm wanting to share? And it's a story that's built up over multiple releases. And so, if you have a professional that's going in and creating those stories, then there's a lot more consistency, and yeah, it can just be a lot more helpful to really develop that story, I think, with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it before you send out the press release.
Yeah, yeah. I think, when you're in a world where, I can't tell you the latest figure of how many songs are released every day on just Spotify, but it's something like it's a lot. It's a huge amount. And so the reality is that if you're releasing music as an independent artist, you need to be able to stand out more than just your music alone. And by building that portfolio of your story that's out there, that in a way that people can truly connect with who you are, that really creates that sort of that way for you to stand out.
Yep. And then has your work with Ryzen then fed back into your music in any way?
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, probably in a number of ways. So, one, you're learning a lot through the music that comes through. And I think you're seeing things a lot more objectively when you're dealing with other people. Um, so, yeah, it's definitely helped with being able to be more objective with what I'm doing. It's also, um, yeah, I think connection wise, it's definitely helped me with my music as well, because you build these relationships with when you're doing publicity, you're building relationships with the people that you're talking to on a regular basis, and yeah, it definitely helps.
And then how do you manage to balance these two sides of your life? I imagine they're both quite busy all the
Um,
time.
that's a great question. Yeah, so the quick answer is I have no idea. But ultimately, um, I've always been somebody who does a lot. I'm always on the go. I'm always trying different things. And I think probably the number one thing for me is I'm compassionate with myself if I don't get everything on my ginormous list done in a day. And I think you can spend so much time beating yourself up, which tires you out, which means you don't get as much done. So that's probably the first thing. I always make a list, which was a huge thing for me to get used to because I'm all over the place. I always just want to do what's fun or what I feel like, or, just the exciting things. But by making a list, I can just go cross off, I've done this. But also you realize that there's bigger times with certain things. You'll have, obviously when you're doing a music release, there's a lot more going into it during that time. When you're at the beginning of a campaign for a new client doing PR, that's peak. Like, you set aside time according to what's happening. And also when I plan my releases, I don't plan it to be on the same day as a release of one of my clients.
Yep.
So yeah, that helps. I'm also a bit of a workaholic. Like I don't stop very much, which is my dog's nemesis. So she absolutely hates it when I'm working too many hours.
I think that's just a creative problem. Everybody, I think, seems to go through that.
Well, that's the thing. I actually really, truly enjoy what I do. So it doesn't feel like I'm working. I'm actually getting out there and doing what I love to do. And it's sort of like, well, if you weren't doing that, what would you be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in front of the TV or, so it's, yeah, that's sort of generally how I go.
And I guess by having that list as well, you get those little senses of accomplishment every time you get to cross something off, no matter how minor it might be.
Absolutely. It took me a really long time to get used to the list, though. Like I am in nature, I'm very rebellious, and so I look at the list and go, I don't want to do that. I'll do this instead. But yeah, it's actually really, really beneficial for me to do that, and I'm a lot more productive since I've had that going.
Fantastic. So looking ahead, firstly with your own music and then with the PR, what else is on the horizon for you in the coming months?
Yeah, so with music or sorry.
With both. So music firstly, and then
Yeah.
the PR as
So
well.
yeah, so I actually took a little bit of a break over our Australian summer for music. I wanted to kind of have a fresh start. I have all these songs in my head, and I'm actually going to take a little bit of a new direction. Um, I've been doing a lot of very emotional type slow songs, and I've got some plans for something very different. So, still looking at some very important subjects. Um, there's a song that is all formulated in my head that I just need to get out. That's all about body image, which I think is really important to share. So yeah, there's a lot happening with that. I'm also collaborating with a Canadian producer. I released a track with him a number of months ago. He released an IDM album, which I was singing on one of the songs, and he's now looking at a house album. So I'm collaborating with him on that. And I think that's all at the moment. But yeah, there'll be more to come. So definitely check out my socials and my website, Karen Harding Music, to find out more. And with PR, I'm working at the moment. I'm working with a couple of great artists that we're promoting. I've also been promoting. We've got a compilation album, which for Sounds on the Couch we're releasing with 12 amazing independent artists. So I'm promoting that as well. And I'm looking to get a lot more into the educational space with Ryzen as well. So a lot of YouTube videos and maybe some courses and books and things that might be helpful to sort of fill in some of those gaps that I was talking about earlier.
Awesome. We'll keep an eye out on all of that stuff. So you mentioned the website. Is that the best place for people to support you and track this creative journey?
Yeah, all my socials are fantastic. So Karen Harding Music on every platform. On Instagram is sort of my main platform where I post, and then Facebook and YouTube and Twitter as well. all of those places, Karen Harding Music. Yeah, definitely. And for Rise Indie, it's the same Rise Indie on social, so on Instagram and Twitter, and riseindie.com is the website.
Perfect. We'll link all of those in the article. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having me.